Hello and hello, welcome back to the Undisputed Champ YouTube boxing channel. If you like the videos I've already put out, make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button. And let's get into the video of today. This video has been heavily requested and it is called Boxing 101. So today I just want to talk about just the different terminology that's in boxing, a background of some of the things that's around boxing, and hopefully after you've taken this video in, when you watch some of my other videos and other people that do boxing videos on YouTube, you have a bit of a sense of what's going on. If you're a hardcore fan, a lot of the stuff you'll already know, but there might be some new stuff that you're not quite used to. And if you're not a super hardcore boxing fan, then there's definitely some stuff that you can take from this. So yeah, let's get into this. I thought I'd start off with just doing a distinguishing factor between the two types of boxing that are prominent in today's world. And this is amateur boxing and professional boxing. So with amateur boxing, this is what you see in the Olympics. The Olympics is the major tournament for amateur boxers. And amateur boxing is across 3 rounds. They used to wear headguard back in the day, but the majority of the major organisations for amateur boxing have removed headguards. This is because they believe that boxers, when they're fighting with headguards on, try to punch harder because psychologically they're trying to punch through the headguard to then create damage to the opponent. Whereas when there isn't headguards, they're not trying to punch as hard, which I guess they've done their studies, they've done their tests, and this is what they found out. So they've deemed it safer without headguards. People say that there's more instances of cuts without headguards, etc., etc. But anyways, I am not the scientist who's done the studies, but that's the conclusion they've come to. Also with amateur boxing, the record that you amass in amateur boxing can't be translated into professional boxing. So because they're two completely separate boxing styles, amateur boxing record is one record, and when you turn professional, you'll start again with a 0 boxing record. So none of your wins in amateur boxing will translate into professional boxing. Also with amateur boxing, it's a complete different style to the way that they box. Back in the day, it used to be a point scoring system where it would just be every punch you land, you'd get scored a point. So that turned it into a very jab heavy sport, because jab is usually the easiest punch to land. So amateur boxers always used to come through with a great jab. But now the style just kind of changed because they've changed the scoring to more of a professional style. So it's still quite jab heavy and landing punches, but it's not as much focus on it as it was. And also the power of your punches isn't really scored in amateur boxing, whereas the power of a puncher is definitely looked at a lot more in professional boxing. Crossing over into professional boxing, now there's a vast difference. So professional boxing, you have different amount of rounds that the fight can go. Obviously, professional boxing understands that a lot of the boxers that are coming through would have been schooled in the amateur way, which is only 3 rounds. So there is a bit of leeway in professional boxing for boxers to build their way up and to gain experience before they start doing the full 12 rounds of boxing. So professional boxing, once you've just turned pro, you normally start off with a 4-rounder. This is similar to amateur boxing with 1 extra round, giving the boxers a bit of time to acclimatise to professional boxing, acclimatise to fighting pros who have been in the game for a long time, acclimatise to just the environment. After the 4-rounders, they normally push up to 6-rounder. Again, this gives the boxer a little bit more time to acclimatise, not chucking them straight into 12-rounders and 10-rounders, but it gives them time to get used to the sport, get used to the punches. From what I understand is professional boxers use smaller gloves than amateur boxers, so they're getting used to being hit with smaller gloves in the ring, etc., etc. Then you can go up to a 10-rounder. A 10-rounder is the normal limit for a lot of boxing matches that aren't title fights. So this, for a lot of heavyweight fights that aren't for titles, they're normally 10-rounders, and even a lot of other weights, but I know it's prevalent in the heavyweight division that if it's not a championship fight, they'll normally fight for 10 rounds. And then you have the maximum, the full limit for professional boxing, which is 12 rounds. It used to be 15 rounds, but I think it's in the late 80s, or the early 80s, they changed it from 15 rounds to 12 rounders. And this was to make the boxing a bit safer. They felt that after 12 rounds, boxers were getting dehydrated and the punches were having a significantly more devastating effect after 12 rounds. So, I mean, after 12 rounds, 12 to 15 rounds. So, putting the limit at 12 rounds, they felt that it was a bit safer for the boxers, and it still gave viewing public a good spectacle. So with the 12 rounds, you have what are called the 10th, 11th and 12th. These are called the championship rounds. These are where a lot can happen. Fights can be won and lost in these rounds. People can fatigue in these rounds. And also, these rounds only take place, 11 and 12 only take place normally when there's a title fight. So you could be way down on the scorecards, and then you could turn it around in the 11th and 12th, get a knockdown, get a knockout, and you can win the fight. The scoring system in professional boxing, as I said, is historically been different to the amateur. Recently, they've tried to converge a bit, but it's historically been different. And the scoring system for professional boxing is on the 10-point system. So there's be 3 judges in a professional boxing fight. These judges usually sit at different sides of the ring so they can get different views of the fight. The judges will then score a fight round by round. As there's 2 fighters, the judge can give a maximum of 10 points to a fighter who they think has won the round, and usually they'll give 9 points to the fighter that they deem to have lost the round. The criteria that they use is effective aggression, ring generalship, the quality of the defense the fighter has shown, and the amount of hard, clean, effective punches the fighter has landed. Obviously, these are quite subjective in nature, but this is the scoring system that has historically been used in professional boxing and is still used up till today. So, in addition to the fact that the judge has deemed to have won the round would get 10, and the fact the judge has deemed to have lost the round would get 9, if a fighter manages to knock another fighter down, the fighter that's been knocked down will usually lose a point. So instead of being a 10-9 round, it will be a 10-8 round. So the fighter that has been knocked down will, instead of getting 9, will now get 8, and the fighter who's won the round will keep their 10. If you get another knockdown, it goes to a 10-7 round. So that's 2 knockdowns in the round. So it'll be 10 for the fighter who's deemed to have won the fight, and 7 for the fighter that's deemed to have lost the round. If you get a third knockdown, it'll go to a 10-6 round. And again, 10 to the fighter that they've deemed to have won the fight and won the round, and 6 to the fighter that they've deemed to have lost the round. But then it's capped at that. A round doesn't go below 6 points for the losing fighter of that round. And usually, if you've been knocked down 3 times in a round, it's likely the referee might stop the fight, but the referee doesn't have to. Especially if they're using the no free knockdown rule, which is widely used in professional boxing today. But usually the damage that boxer would have accumulated, the referee would be likely to stop the fight in that instance. But 10-6 round is the minimum you can get the round going. So even if you get knocked down 10 times in a round, the referee doesn't stop it, you're still going to be a 10-6 round. Also, another major thing in boxing, and the thing that everybody likes to talk about, is the world titles. So on this channel, we're called the Undisputed Champ because we love undisputed champions. An undisputed champion is a champion that has captured the 4 major world title belts at one weight. The most recent example I can give for this is Teofimo Lopez. At lightweight, he managed to pick up a world title belt from the WBC, which is the World Boxing Council. Managed to pick up a world title belt from the WBA, which is the World Boxing Association. Managed to pick up a world title belt from WBO, which is the World Boxing Organization. And he's picked up a world title belt from the IBF, which is the International Boxing Federation. As boxing fans, we hate that there's 4 world title belts, 4 sanctioning bodies, because this just leads to confusion, especially for people who don't go out there or who haven't done the research, which you shouldn't have to do really. You should you should be able to just say, here's one guy who's the world champion and he's the world champion. But if unfortunately in today's day and age, you have to go out and do a bit of research, a bit of background reading to understand why two people can be called a world champion in one weight division and they haven't fought each other. This is why. The reasoning behind there being different sanctioning bodies, firstly, it's a bit of a money grab. One organisation declared themselves the people that can call people champions. Another group came along and they said, well, we think we can do a better job than you, so we're gonna call people world champions. And once you get enough notoriety, once you get enough clout, it just sticks. Another reasoning behind this is there were, back in the day, even today, there's still corruption in boxing and corruption in sport. But back in the day, it was a lot of corruption in boxing, and world champions would pick and choose who they wanted to fight. So they would have mandatories, but they'd be able to circumvent mandatories. They'd be able to bribe people and move people out of the rankings, etc., etc. And this was happening on a consistent basis, and boxers were getting fed up with this. So when a new sanctioning body came around and said, we'll do it better, we won't allow people to circumvent the rules, we won't be bribed, boxers started to fight for that belt. And to be honest, what makes a belt isn't the sanctioning body, but it's the boxer. So if the most famous boxer in the world, let's go historically and say Muhammad Ali, and he says, you know what, I'm only fighting for the WBC belt. Well, if you want to be considered the best and you want to say I'm a legitimate world champion, you'll have to fight Muhammad Ali for that WBC belt, which makes the WBA belt, which was around at the same time, a bit less prestigious. And that's how the WBC gets notoriety, and that's how the WBC will be able to establish itself, and more boxers will start coming, and then there you have it. The WBC's around, and it can call itself a world champion. The reason these four sanctioned bodies, WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF, have been able to legitimize themselves is because all these other sanctioning bodies recognize the other sanctioning bodies, and only these four. Other belts exist, other sanctioning bodies exist, like the WBF, not really respected, IBO, not really respected, but these four exist because they've made themselves like an oligopoly, where they're saying, okay, you're just about big enough and you're taking enough money and sanctioning fees away from us that we'll recognize you. But if we recognize you, you recognize us. And then in a pat, us four, we won't recognize anybody else. And it's only us four that is going to matter. And it's only us four that will have legitimacy in boxing. And at the moment, this is where we are. Other sanctioning bodies are trying to come through. I think the biggest at the moment the biggest out of the big four is the IBO. But the other sanctioning bodies are refusing to recognize the IBO. And this is the merry-go-round that we have to go through. But just know that on this channel, we want undisputed champions. We want people like Alexander Usyk, people like Terence Crawford, people like Bernard Hopkins, people like Lennox Lewis, people like Teofimo Lopez. We want fighters like that who go out there and say, I'm not champion until I collect all the belts. And that is exactly what they did. They collected all the belts at the weight division that they're at. And then you can't argue with them. When they say I'm the real one and only champ, they are, because they hold all the major belts at the weight division and they can't be messed with. Talking about sanctioning bodies, they collect money by charging sanctioning fees. Now, sanctioning fees are the money that they charge to boxers when the boxers want to either get a ranking or the boxers hold belts at the division and want to legitimize their fight. So when it usually is a percentage of the purse, and let's say the boxer's purse is supposed to be £1 million, and then the sanctioning body will put a 10% sanctioning fee. I think that's pretty high. I think it's normally in the percent, like 2 or 3%, but let's just say it's a 10% sanctioning fee. Then the boxer will pay the sanctioning body £100,000. In return, the sanctioning body will recognise the boxer as fighting for their belt, so either give them a ranking, or if they're a champion, the sanctioning body will legitimise the fight and will allow them to put that on their record. And that's how boxing moves. So a lot of boxers, when they do eventually become undisputed, drop all the belts because they don't want to give away so much of their purse away to sanctioning bodies, when if all they need to hold is one belt to be called a recognised champion, that's all they'll do. I can't blame the boxers. This is the state of boxing that we're in. but on this channel we're positive, and as I said, Undisputed Champions and Undisputed Champs, that's what we want, and that's who we support on this channel. That is who we support. Going forward, I'd just like to talk a bit about purses and purse bids. So purses in boxing is what is the general term used to describe the amount of money that a boxer would earn for a fight. And a purse bid is used when two boxers can't come to an agreement on the amount of money that should be split in a fight. So I'll give you an example. We have Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. In this example, they're both not champions. The WBC heavyweight title belt and the IBF heavyweight title belt are vacant, and these two are going to fight for those belts. They can't come to an agreement within 30 days of the sanctioning body saying we want you two to fight for our belt. They cannot come to an agreement on the money split, on who's going to earn what, or let's say there's a pot of £1 million available for the fight. They can't come to a split on percentages, who's going to earn 60%, who's going to earn 40%, or vice versa. So what the sanctioning bodies will do is called a purse bid. A purse bid is a blind bid where the fighters, normally the representative of the fighters, will put in a bid for the fight. So let's say the representative for Anthony Joshua puts in a £10 million bid, and the representatives for Tyson Fury put in a £20 million bid. The purse bids are sealed and blind, and once the purse bid time is done, it's usually 1 day, the sanctioning bodies will reveal who has paid the most money. The money is normally paid into an escrow account and is held until the end of the purse bids. Once the purse bids are revealed, obviously Tyson Fury's camp has paid more money for the fight. They will then decide where the fight is held. They will decide the capacity of the fight. But because it's gone to purse bids, the split is normally determined by the sanctioning body. So because these two will be both not champions, it's likely to be the sanctioning body will do a 50-50 split. So of that £20 million, 10 million will go to Tyson, 10 million will go to AJ. But the promotional aspect of the fight will belong to Tyson Fury's camp. So as I said, it'll be their camp that decides where it is. It'll be their camp that promotes it. Tyson Fury will probably be the home fighter because it'll be his camp. So that's how the purse bid split. So when you hear boxers talking about purses and purse bid splits, that's what they're talking about. They're basically talking about money and who's going to promote the fight. And then we go on to promoters. This is a nice little segue onto the promoters. At the moment, obviously boxers are people that get in the ring. Boxers are the ones that fight, but they're not really the ones that control the sport. And I don't think it's sanctioning bodies either. I think, personally, promoters control the sport. And some of these promoters have been around for years. Boxers come and go, but it seems like promoters stay forever. In world boxing, there's 4 major promotional bodies. There are 2 based in the UK and 2 based in the US. They are Matchroom Boxing. This is owned and run by the Hearn family with Eddie Hearn at the helm. Then you have Queensbury Promotions, Frank Warren. This is run and owned by Frank Warren, based in the UK also. And then in the US, you have Premier Boxing Champions, PBC. This is run by Al Heyman's company and Al Heyman's people. And then you have Top Rank, which is run by the old fiddler in the sport, the old master, as people want to call him. But he manages to just stay hanging around year after year after year, Bob Arum. And those are the 4 main promotional bodies in the sport. When I look at promotional companies, I can see the benefits because a lot of boxers can't speak for themselves and they can't really promote themselves. So they hire promoters to do that bit of the job for them. But a lot of promoters have been shady. We have people like Don King, who've been known to be shady or allegedly shady in the sport, allegedly has robbed fighters for millions and millions of pounds. And I know Don King, I don't have to say allegedly for this one, he's killed somebody as well. I don't know if it was boxing related or not, but it's got bodies. Then you have people like Frank Warren, who have been shot by allegedly people he used to promote. So we know, or we can assume what kind of relationships he's had with his boxers. Bob Arum has been called every name under the sun. He's been called a white supremacist. He's been called a thief. He's been called everything, but he's still knocking around. I think he might even be in his 90s, or he's definitely in his late 80s, still knocking around. And then you have Eddie Hearn, sort of the new kid on the block, but seems to be taken over. He's got his deal with the Zone, multi millions. He's got deal with Sky, and at the moment you don't hear too many negative things coming out of his camp. But boxing is such a dirty sport. Once he's been in it long enough, I'm sure certain things might start to rear their ugly heads. But yeah, promoters, they're what run the sport, and it's also the promotional issues that are kind of stifling the sport as well. There was what was known as the Cold War in the US, in boxing terms anyway, and this was when Golden Boy was still like a very big promotional company, and PBC, owned by Al Heyman, was coming around, and they didn't do business with each other. So if you were signed to PBC or you were promoted by PBC, you couldn't fight Golden Boy fighters and vice versa, just because of egos, because of competition. The promoters just didn't want to have the competition, and yeah, it was killing American boxing for a while. And then we have some sort of a similar issue coming on in the UK, where matchroom fighters don't normally fight Queensberry fighters, and it's just silly. But again, boxing is not a perfect. Boxing is what I like to call an imperfect sport. It has all the attributes to be perfect, but it has so many outside entities that mess with it, that make it imperfect. If it was left down to the boxers, all the boxers would fight each other. I'm nearly certain of that. And boxers that wouldn't want to fight each other, they wouldn't be respected. So they'd be out here anyway. But the system that we have now is just a lot of politics. It's a lot of people trying to A-side other people, and people trying to get one up on other people. And this isn't the sport that we want to see. We want to see the pure side of the sport. But regardless of all of this, all of these politics, all of this purse bids, all of these issues, at the end of the day, once two fighters eventually do get in the ring, no matter how many advantages one fighter may have, it will still come down to who wants it more on the night. And someone with all the disadvantages in the world can still get a win, a la Buster Douglas. Someone with all the disadvantages in the world can still get a win, a la Andy Ruiz Jr. So we've seen upsets happen, even though everything is set up to make the upsetter lose. Upsets still happen, and that's why we love the sport. It's one of the few sports where a man can take his destiny into his own hands and change his whole life in one night with one punch. So yeah, Boxing 101, guys. I'm going to add a few more points to this going forward. And yeah, I want to get back to, now I've got a little bit of spare time, I want to get back to doing my other series, my Ring Magazine Top 10s, and the fights that you need to see. So we're moving, we're working, we're churning away. Any feedback, post in there. Any comments, post in there. Anything else you want to hear, post in the comment section. Get at me, email, whatever way you want to get at me. And yeah, thanks for listening. Thank you for listening.